Hi, what's up YouTube? This is Prateek here from TechnoVFA, and today we are shooting a first video for our channel TechnoVFA. So what is TechnoVFA all about? TechnoVFA is going to be all about gadgets, gadget reviews, tech talks, more researched tech topics. So here we are. So what are we doing here? So we meet a lot of people who ask us about camera, like what's going on in the spec sheet of your mobile phone, like what is 16 megapixel, what is the autofocus, what is LDAF, PDAF, what is aperture. So we thought instead of explaining one by one, let's be more informative and let's do something together. So here we are doing a dedicated video on smartphone cameras. We're gonna cover all topics about smartphone camera, what each and every part does and what each and every part means. So without further delay, let's get started. So here we'll talk about the camera part by part and what basically going inside your smartphone camera. So to start off with, we have sensor. So what is a sensor? Sensor is actually a solid state device on the back of your phone and also on the front of your phone, which is a selfie camera. So what is sensor? Sensor is basically the device which captures all the light and details for your photo. So sensor are of two types. You have CMOS sensor, you have BSI sensors. CMOS sensors are basically less power consumption and have not very good low light performance. You'll find them in mostly all of the smartphone cameras. Then we come up to BSI sensors. BSI sensors are nothing but backside illuminated CMOS sensors. So BSI sensors have good low light performance and a slightly more power consumption. So what makes BSI sensors more good in low light conditions? So BSI sensors have a slightly tilted lens at the back of the sensor which allows more light to get reflected back in with the photos. So basically more lights mean good photos. So BSI sensors are costly and they are included in the DSLRs and some of the smartphone cameras. The sensor, we move on to the sensor size. So sensor size determines how big is your sensor. So the bigger the sensor, the better is the photo and the more light it can intake. So the major difference between a DSLR and this smartphone camera over here is the sensor size. So DSLRs have a slightly or majorly very bigger sensor which makes them very good than your smartphones. So how to determine the sensor size? Sensor size is determined by 1 slash some number. For example, this over here is 1 slash 2.4 inches. So it's very small. So the smaller the number besides 1 slash, the bigger is your sensor, the bigger light it can take and the better photos you can get. So one more thing with the sensor and sensor size is the pixel size. Pixel size is very highly not very recognized, but pixel size plays a very important role in the photo quality. So the bigger the pixels you have, the more light they can intake and the better photos you can get. So now moving on from the pixel size to the megapixel. So megapixel was the most hyped thing at a time. You've got smartphone makers coming up with 16 megapixel camera, 21 megapixel camera, the Nokia Lumia coming with 41 megapixel camera. So there was a time when cameras were just judged only by pixel size. The companies used to promote their camera only by pixel size. But gone is the time. We have had Apple since a long time coming up with 12 megapixel phones, 8 megapixel rear cameras. You've got the S7 Edge, which slightly downgraded to 12 megapixel camera from 16 megapixel camera. And we were wondering, mostly people were wondering, like how good will be the 12 megapixel camera? Trust me, megapixel count never makes up a photo and never decides how good an image can be. So your 16 megapixel camera over here on the Moto Z Play is not good and it's not even comparatively great than S7 Edge. Your S7 Edge has a 12 megapixel camera which is slightly or which is drastically better than this camera. So moving on from the pixel size to the megapixel count. We've got smartphone companies promoting their phones on just on megapixel count. There's a general myth among people that more megapixel, more the better is camera. So you've got companies promoting a 16 megapixel camera, 21 megapixel camera, but trust me, megapixel count does not matter that much. It's not like a 21 megapixel camera is better than a 16 megapixel camera. A 12 megapixel camera with a more pixel count and the bigger pixel size can be better and will be better than a 16 megapixel camera. So we're not going into detail on this topic. Let me know if you want us to do a detailed description on this particular topic, because megapixel and how does pixel size and megapixel count affects is a very vast topic and we could do a separate video on this. So moving on from the megapixel count to the aperture. So what is aperture? Aperture is denoted by f slash constant. For example, f slash 2.0. So f is the focal length of your camera and the number is the opening of the camera lens. So the smaller the number, the bigger will be the opening of your camera lens, and the more light it can intake and better. More light generally means better picture. So with your smartphone cameras, you have a fixed aperture. When you buy a DSLR, it ranges from f slash 1.7 to f slash 3.6, like variable numbers. So there you can adjust your aperture, but when you buy a smartphone camera, the aperture is fixed. You cannot increase or decrease the aperture. So basically, lesser number, the better is the camera, the better is the aperture, and the more light it can take. So in general terms, f by 1.7 is better than f by 2.0. So moving on from the aperture to the image stabilization. So what is image stabilization? Image stabilization is that part when you try to click a photo and you have a handshake, your camera lens tries to adjust and make sure that the photo is not blurry or the video is not shaking. So you have two types of image stabilization. For now, it's optical image stabilization and you have electrical image stabilization. Optical image stabilization is done on the hardware part, where your lens actually tries to adjust by moving physically, and your electrical image stabilization is where your camera software tries to adjust the image. So here basically electrical image stabilization cannot be predicted how good it is. Optical image stabilization is better than electrical image stabilization, because how good electrical image stabilization is depends on the implementation of the camera software. The best I could find was Google Pixel. They have done a fabulous job with electrical image stabilization. The camera doesn't have optical image stabilization, but still you won't feel that there's no optical image stabilization. So kudos to Google. It's a very good electrical image stabilization camera software. We move on to the flash. So basically, what does flash do? Suppose you're walking on a dark street or you walk into a dark room and you cannot see anything. The first thing you do is remove a torch or any light source and you try to flash in front of you so you can see the objects. This is what your camera also tries to do. When it cannot see objects in front of it, it just it uses its flash to illuminate the objects in front of it, tries to focus and clicks a picture. So now we have advanced so ahead that we have in our smartphone cameras some three types of LED flashes. You have a single LED flash, you have a dual LED flash, and you have the iPhone-ish quad LED flash. So what is single LED flash, what is dual LED flash, and what is quad LED flash? So basically, single LED flash is only a single source of LED which flashes with a single color. And then we move on to dual LED flash. Dual LED flash basically will give you more light, will illuminate better, and it will have two types of color. You will have a warm tone flash, you will have a cold tone flash. So it will use them accordingly to the environment or to the surrounding you're trying to click. If it feels there needs to be more warmth, it will use the warm tone flash. If it feels there needs to be more calm, cool, or the image needs to be on the bluish side, it will use a cold LED flash. So then coming to quad LED flash, quad LED flash is nothing but you have two warm LEDs and two cold tone LEDs. So here it will you have more light to throw. Now we move on to the autofocus. Autofocus is where your camera tries to focus onto the subject. So there are three types of autofocus. One is phase detection autofocus, laser detection autofocus, contrast detection autofocus. Contrast detection autofocus is out of date and it basically relied on the darker and lighter parts of the image to focus on the subject. So what we have is laser autofocus. Laser detection autofocus is where you have two pinholes or a single pinhole where you have a receptor and a transmitter. Transmitter emits laser beams in all directions and they hit the subject and bounce back, where the receptor recepts the laser beams. So depending on the time of the laser beams transmission and reception, the distance of the subject is calculated and the lens adjusts accordingly to focus onto the subject. Then you have phase detection autofocus. Phase detection autofocus is where the camera will judge the light coming from the two ends of the subject and will decide how big is the subject and then will accordingly focus on the subject. So the best implementation would be a mixture of both laser detection autofocus as well as phase detection autofocus, because in many of my experiments and experience I have noticed laser detection autofocus works well with closer objects and phase detection autofocus works well with distant objects. The best implementation till date I found of autofocus was S7 Edge. Now we move on to the last part, which is the image processing. This is the most important or the critical part of your image. This is where your software will gain data from the sensor and try to project it onto your screen. It tries to run its algorithm, it tries to run its filters or whatever it has got to make the photo visible for you. So this actually can make or break your photo. Every company has their different camera processing software. Till date, I found the best was Google Pixel. They have done a terrific job with the camera software. And then you have the Samsungs, you have the iPhone. Those are also very good camera processing software. If I would to rate them, I would rate the Google and the iPhone, that is Apple, at the top. Then we'll have Samsung, because Samsung and some phones try to oversaturate or overexpose the photos. And then you'll have LGs and Nokia are good in sharpening the images. Now what I'm trying to express is that you may have the best hardware in the world, but if your camera software is not good, the image is gonna be pathetic. The image is not gonna be nice. So this is the most important thing. Although it's on the software part, but it does contribute a lot to the quality of your photo. And yes, I hear the question a lot. I hear this thing like my smartphone clicks like a DSLR or my smartphone clicks like a point to shoot camera. It never did, it never is, and it never will. Because the major factor which distinguishes your DSLR with the smartphone camera is the DSLRs have a very bigger sensor. So unless your smartphone is carrying a sensor the size of the T-Rex, yes, you can click a photo like a DSLR. So this brings us to the end of the video. Thank you for watching. Do give it a thumbs up if you liked the video. Vote it down if you didn't. Feel free to comment and let us know if you have any suggestions for us or any recommendations for us. This really helps the channel. For the lighting and everything, because this is our first video, we're still learning. So your help would be much appreciated. So bye bye guys. See you in the next video.